In today's episode, we'll be following Antonio Esfandiari in the biggest buy-in ever in tournaments, a $1 million buy-in at the World Series of Poker. The blinds are $300,000, $600,000, and the ante is $75,000. Currently, there are only 5 players left in the tournament. 2 players folded, and Esfandiari from the button bet $1.32 million. The big blind, David Einhorn, calls. On the flop, there are 3 spades. Einhorn leads out with $1.6 million on a $3.3 million pot. Now, most of the time when a player leads out to the pre-flop raiser on this kind of board, it's for a couple of reasons. The first is if he has a decent hand like a pair with a straight draw, 2-pair, or top pair, and by betting he's trying to protect the hand and not give the opponent a free card, especially when another spade will kill the action. The second is if he has a pair with a big spade or just a big spade, even though most players tend to check raise with this kind of hand instead of leading out. The third is if he has a small flush like 5-3, 4-2, and so on, and he's afraid that with another spade he'll be beat. Antonio flopped bottom pair with an ace-kicker in position. He doesn't have any spades, but he knows that the action might stop on the turn with any spade, a jack, or a 9. And although Einhorn might bet with a better hand right now, Antonio thinks that he can outplay Einhorn and take the pot later in the hand. So he decides to call with the intention that he can represent a draw like a straight, or a flush, or even a big pair. And as I mentioned, with most of the cards to come, Einhorn will check and he can bet and win the hand. On the turn, a 7 of spades shows up, and Einhorn bets $2.5 million on a $6.5 million pot. This bet is thin, and it looks like Einhorn possibly has an ace or king of spades, or on the other hand, he's thinking his hand became weak and now he's trying to bet small, hoping to not get raised and maybe the board will be paired on the river, a situation that might encourage both players to check if they don't have a big hand. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Antonio knows that by calling on the flop he can represent at least one spade, so now in Einhorn's mind he may have hit his flush. In addition, he knows that if Einhorn has an ace, king, or even a jack of spades, he'll probably bet bigger, putting more money in the pot if he thinks he has the best hand, and making Antonio pay if he has a hand like 2-pair, or maybe even a smaller spade. Bear in mind that if Einhorn has an ace or a king of spades, he'll probably check raise on the flop instead of leading out like he did. In this case, folding is not a good option because Antonio's plan on the flop was to call and with any spade to come win the hand. Antonio can raise here, and in most cases Einhorn will fold with a hand like a pair or one medium spade. But to be on the safe side, in case Einhorn has an ace or king of spades, and bet small to induce a raise from Antonio, it's better to call, represent a flush, and bet on the river when Einhorn checks after he's been convinced that he's beat. Antonio calls. On the river, a 5 of hearts shows up, and as planned, Einhorn checks, and Antonio bet a very nice value bet of $4.7 million, like he really had a flush. Einhorn folds, and it turned out that he had the best hand with a pair of 10s.